Today we're going to finish this. This is the K6ARK 100 watt end-fed half-wave kit. We're going to be using this wire and we're going to make a linked end-fed half-wave antenna. Stay tuned, you might learn something. Here's everything that we're going to need today. Of course, we're going to need a completed, or mostly completed, K6ARK antenna kit, and that's the 100 watt version, or any 49:1 transformer. The next thing that we're going to need is banana plugs. These are tiny banana plugs because I'm using pretty thin wire. We'll also need a pair of wire cutters, possibly some needle nose pliers. We'll need some antenna wire. I'm going with the BN-Tech Go 24 gauge silicon wire. We'll need a way to measure the wire. So a nice long tape measure. This one goes out to 300 feet. You don't need one that long, but at least 100 feet would be nice. You're going to need a tent peg to help hold the tape measure down, and you can attach your wire, the end of your wire, to this as well to help you measure a whole lot easier. The next thing we're going to need is a nano VNA or some kind of antenna analyzer. To make our link sections, I'm going to use some ferrules and a ferrule crimper so I know where my frequencies are for each band. I've got the ARRL band plan, and then to get my wire up in the air easily and to be able to take it down easily to make any adjustments, I am using my DX Commander Expedition mast. Now let's get started making my first link for my antenna. I've discovered that my ferrules won't actually fit over my wire, so I'm going to have to order some different ferrules to try this again at another time. But I'm going to go ahead and continue making this because after test fitting these together, it looks like they're going to hold just fine for me to at least get my wire trimmed and tuned for each link. So I'm just going to go ahead and continue anyway and make the loops in my links at a later time. So I've got one of my banana plugs, and these things are tiny. So I need to strip back a little bit of the shield, or the outside, the exterior of the wire, and get it trimmed up to fit. Now I want the wire to the outside of the wire to stop right in this area so I can clamp that down on there and it will hold it there. When I get home, I will go through and solder the wire to the connector and then cover it with heat shrink. Now let's go ahead and get the tape measure out and measure out our first link. Our first link is going to be for 12 meters. All right, I'm going to try and do as much of this in the shade as I can today. So let's go ahead and put our stake in the ground. It doesn't have to be in the ground all that great, just enough to stick the top of my tape measure over. I'm going to push that in the ground. And we are good to go to, I'm just going to go ahead and wheel out about 68 feet, because that's what I'm going to need total to go all the way out to 40 meters. Now I'm going to take my wire and I'm going to make a little loop on it and throw just a small zip tie. And this is mainly just to hold it in place so I can measure. My first link I'm going to make is 12 meters, and that is roughly 20 feet of wire. All right, here is roughly 20 feet. I'm going to give myself about 6 inches just to make sure I'm not cutting this too short, and I'm going to snip it off. All right, we're going to go ahead and set up the DX Commander mast and get this thing hoisted up in the air. So first things first, remove the cap. I normally keep one of these little S-beaners in the very top here. I'm going to pull the topmost section out. And as you can see, I've kind of drilled that hole a little bit bigger. This slides down over top like so. So I've got my wire cut. And to make this a whole lot easier, there are little holes here on these S-clip or S-beaners. Feed it through and then back through, and then back through one of the other holes, and that'll hold it tight enough while you put this in the air to take a measurement with the Nano VNA. And we're going to go ahead and extend this up. And for now, I'm going to use a couple of these gear ties to secure this mast to this table like this so it does not fall over. And now we can take this end and hook it up to our 49-to-1 and throw the Nano VNA on it. Now I've color coded this to where the yellow end is for my antenna to match my antenna wire color. And eventually this loop will be able to be clipped to a string that I'm going to put right there for tension relief. But for now, we're just going to set this on the table like so, and I'll connect my coax to it. All right, we're going to connect up my Nano VNA, adapt my BNC back to a PL259 so I can use an SO239 adapter to SMA to be able to hook this up to my Nano VNA. All right, got out my band plan, go down to 12 meters, and it looks like I need to be somewhere between 24,930 for the voice side to 24,990. So I'm going to set my range on my Nano VNA, 23 megahertz, and the stop at 26 megahertz. And I'm about 2 to 1 at 23 megahertz, so I am really long. Time to drop the antenna, trim a bunch off, and we'll see where we're at. All right, I was able to get everything down to about 1.2 to 1.3 to 1. Across pretty well the whole band. So that's all done. This is how much wire I trimmed off. I will list my measurement to start with down in the bottom somewhere. But it looks like you can start with about a foot less and then kind of go from there and fine tune. So next step is to put the banana plug end on that and cut the next length. So I went ahead and put the other end of my banana plug or banana connector on the spool, because in my notes I have everything measured out by total length. So I'm going to take the 12-meter section, hook it back up to the front of the tape measure, and measure out to a total of 28 feet for my 17-meter length. So we're back on the workbench to finish out this antenna. Here's some of the tools and other supplies that we're going to need. Going to need a heat gun, a pair of scissors, a lighter, a ferrule crimper, a diagonal cutter, possibly going to need a solder sucker just in case I make a mistake, a soldering iron, some flux, it's not required but it does help, and some solder. And then the rest of the supplies that we're going to need that didn't come with the kit is some heat shrink, some ferrules, and a little piece of some bank line or twine or whatever you want to use to put in these little holes to help give you a strain relief on this antenna. So we're going to get started with putting this big heat shrink on this 49 to 1 transformer. All right, so let's get started. First thing we're going to do is put our bank line in here before we put the heat shrink on this. Before I do that is I just tied a little knot in one end and hit it with the lighter to make the knot to where it will melt all together and not come out. We want the loop to come out through the bottom, so we're going to feed it in through the top. Pull through. And push this back up and through. And we're going to just tie a quick little overhand knot in this end. Tighten it up towards the end. Then we're going to hit it with a lighter. And now it's all melted together and that knot will not come out. Then just pull that back through like so. First, we're going to figure out if this is the exact right size we need or if we need to trim a little bit off. And it looks like I'm going to be trimming just a little bit off. I want it to go over the top a little bit, but not really that much. Now, when you're doing this with the heat gun, be sure to try not to get it too hot. I think I kind of messed that up a little bit. I'm gonna have to source a new one of these and try that again. So I messed up when I put this heat shrink on. I would recommend probably not cutting it and then heat shrinking on there, holding it vertical like so, but probably going to want to use a pair of pliers because it's going to get pretty warm. And you'll want to watch the heat from your heat gun so you don't heat everything up enough to melt solder. So I'm going to just get a new one of these and I'll put it on later. All right, so moving on to the antenna. I went ahead and put these little banana connectors on, just crimped them on out in the field, and that was good enough to hold them on there so I could get all the antenna links measured out and done. So now I just need to go ahead and apply some solder in here and call it a day and put heat shrink over top of it. Now, these are not required to do this project, but they're going to help me out quite a bit because these little helping hands are going to hold this exactly where I want it so I can apply the solder. Now we want to make sure we have a nice clean tip, and that's why I went through and did all that. Hit the tip with a little flux, cleaned it off, and then put a little bit of solder on it, and then cleaned that off. So let's unwind some solder so I have plenty to work with. And let's get started doing this. All right, this one is done, if I can get that to focus in there. And that's really all that's to soldering these on. It doesn't take much. And I'm just going to skip through and go ahead and do the rest. Now the next thing that we want to do is we want to put heat shrink on this to protect it. Now this heat shrink, it comes in a longer tube, so we're going to cut it down to just a little bit more than what we need. So we're going to roughly just cut it in half, and that's about 3/4 of an inch. Just slide that on there like so. And then I'm going to just hit it with a lighter real quick. Now let's test our connection and make sure that we didn't put the heat shrink too far up the connector. Nope. Looks like it fits just fine. So next thing we want to do is we want to create a loop. So we can hook a little S-beaner in this loop and then hook it to this rope. And we're going to do the same thing for each link. That way we can hook the links together so all of the strain is not on the banana plug. So we're going to need one of these ferrules, and for the wire that I'm using, it's 24 gauge wire, just silicone wire. And so this ferrule is a 10 gauge ferrule. That way we can slide the wire through, we can double the wire over and slide it through, and it should also be able to fit over top of the heat shrink. Because we want to put a little bit of heat shrink on here to protect the wire, because the silicone wire is very easy to pull the outside of the wire off and expose bare wire. So we're going to roughly do it like so. That way there's plenty of play here to get it to plug in. All right, now let's slide the ferrule over. So I've got the ferrule installed, well, I've got the heat shrink installed and the ferrule installed. And here's my loop to put the S-beaner through. And that should be enough of a loop to hook it through very easily. So we need to use the crimper, which this is a special ferrule crimper that came in the kit that I ordered. And we need to stick this through. And just make sure the ferrule is in there, and then just squeeze all the way and crimp it down. And that's it, a nice crimped connection. Now I'm going to go through, and each link on each end is going to be done exactly the same way. I finished soldering on the banana plugs, putting on heat shrink over the banana plug itself, also putting on heat shrink over the loop end, and then putting a 10 gauge ferrule on. I'm leaving enough of a loop to be able to use an S-beaner like this one in each link. So the goal is to hook the wire like that in one end of the S-beaner, hook the other end in, like so, and that provides strain relief, so nothing is pulling on the banana plug itself. And you can plug it in and link and unlink your antenna without actually having to take it down out of the tree. So my antenna is good for anything 40 through 10 meters. That's the way I designed it. I've got the 12 meter link, a 17 meter link, a 20 meter link, a 30 meter link, and a 40 meter link. Say I really only have room for a 20 meter end fed. I can just unclip all this, undo this, and I don't need the extra 30 and 40 meter links. I can actually just put it up in the tree like this. And just use it that way. Now, one thing I did on the end, since this goes all the way out, this is the very end at 40 meters. Because it's a nice long antenna, I did not want the end to slip out, so I ended up using a full piece of heat shrink that's roughly about 2.5 inches, and then I put 2 ferrules on there to make sure that nothing is going anywhere if there's a little bit of tension on this line. All right, and this is how the first link all hooks up and how it will look. Now don't worry about this quite yet. Like I said, I messed up. I need to get a new piece of heat shrink for that, and I will put that on, and it won't be in this video. But as you can see, I've got this initial loop here. It connects in on an S-beaner onto this bank line. So that way my antenna is not pulling on the banana plug itself. Links for everything that I used in this video will be down in the description. Thanks for watching. If you have any comments or suggestions, please drop them down in the comments below. If you like this video, please give it a like, and go ahead and also subscribe to my channel. That way you can catch more videos like this or any other videos that I made. Please check out the video linked up here in the corner. That's going to be part 1 of the K6ARK 100 watt antenna build, where we build this 49:1 transformer. Thanks for watching. 73.